Welcome back to another Runic Strife Gauntlet video. This time it's Acts 6 through 10 and mapping. If you've missed the previous two videos in this mini-series about surviving the first half of the campaign in the Gauntlet, I'll link them in the video description below. So you've made it to Act 6. This is where the Gauntlet zone modifiers are changing in a big way. Here's the modifiers for Act 6 through 10. Monsters take 30% less damage. This means you'll need to deal about 43% more damage to kill monsters than you otherwise would have. Monsters deal 30% increased damage is the only returning modifier from the first 5 acts. Then we have the 3 extremely dangerous modifiers for these acts, beginning with 30% monster haste, then 100% increased monster area of effect, and finishing with monsters dealing 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage. Okay, so the danger going from the first half of the campaign to the second half shifts from being primarily elemental damage and projectile abilities that can shotgun you, to dangerous physical-based abilities and slams, which usually have slow, telegraphed wind-ups, but will be much faster with that haste modifier in play. Before venturing out from the Act 6 town, you want to ensure that you still have capped elemental resistances after that 30% penalty from killing Kitava in Act 5. And ideally, you want to have at least positive chaos resistance. This is achieved easiest by using 2 amethyst rings to bring that base minus 30% chaos resistance into the positives. You likely want to clear the Twilight Strand to have access to the gems vendor, and even if you don't need a specific gem at this stage, I still recommend completing this quest for future use. The Twilight Strand is a relatively safe zone to farm if you need to, but you're likely already considerably over-leveled from farming the chamber in Act 5. Now, the first 3 zones in Act 6 have some extremely dangerous monsters that use a lot of AoE elemental abilities. These will be really fast and have a much bigger area during the Gauntlet, so be very careful not to get blocked and just stay on the move. Do not get hit by Tukohama's Slam. This is a physical ability converted to fire, so it will really hurt in the Gauntlet with the extra chaos damage. Keep your distance as well, as the Slam will be much bigger and activate a lot faster too. Watch out for the Brutus Slams too. These are also Fizz convert abilities, and they'll hit huge areas in the Gauntlet, so watch your step. Avoid Abarath's Meteors, but mostly for this boss you want to watch out for his auto attacks while he's enraged. He already hits very fast and has Fizz as extra fire, so in the Gauntlet those autos will hurt a lot. Rizlatha isn't too bad, just try to stay behind this boss to avoid taking a bunch of chaos damage. Be very careful in the Brine King's Reef. This is probably the worst zone in Act 6. The most dangerous monsters here are the animated reef golems. Even the normal white monsters deal a lot of damage with their slam. These golems deal physical damage converted to cold, so they'll gain extra chaos damage and they'll be very fast. Just try to avoid getting into melee range with them, and watch out for any rare versions, they can be incredibly rippy. For the Brine King himself, you're mainly looking for his overhead slam and his sweep abilities. During the phase where you need to avoid the lightning spell AoEs, remember that you can just portal out and back in and wait in the grace period to avoid having to dodge them. This will be a good strategy in the Gauntlet, as the AoEs will be much larger and harder to avoid. Speak to Sin right after to grab the Brine King's Major Pantheon to prevent getting chain stunned. Moving on to Act 7. In Malagaro's Sanctum, watch out for the bleeding inflicted by the monster attacks here, and for Malagaro himself, when he teleports to use his slam, move behind him to ensure you don't get hit, because the AoE of this attack will be much larger. Pay attention to his animations, because the slam will execute much faster with the haste modifier in play. Move around the bears in the den and in the Ashen Fields, watch out for their ground slams. Groost can deal a lot of damage if you stand still because of his barrage ability. Move around him and this fight should be quite easy. Speak to Sin directly after the encounter to activate the Ralakesh Minor Pantheon to help deal with bleeding. It's also a big help against labyrinth traps. I'd recommend skipping Gruthkol and coming back a bit later on when you're stronger. The AoE modifier in particular makes this fight very scary, and unless you think you have enough damage to burst her down very quickly, it's not worth the risk. Avoid the melee attacks of these vile gargantuans in the Causeway and the Temple of Decay. They're very slow, but they hit really hard. Look out for these volatile poison monsters. They throw these green orb traps which deal chaos damage. For Arakali, you're mainly looking to dodge the projectiles which deal physical damage that's partly converted to chaos. These will deal a lot more damage in the Gauntlet and they'll cover a larger area. Rarely, Arakali will pull purple orbs across the arena, move out of their way. Into Act 8, there's not many parts of this act that are exceptionally dangerous because of the Gauntlet mods. The Doedre fight has 3 arena colours which can be cycled using the valve. Each colour will present a different debuff that can be applied to you. Red debuffs make you take increased damage, green debuffs make you deal less damage, and the purple debuffs slow your action speed. Hitting the valve changes the colour of the arena and removes the current debuffs on you. It also buys you a bit of time because Doedre will stop attacking for a brief moment. The colour of Doedre is also important as she gains a buff based on her colour. Red makes her take reduced damage, green makes her deal more damage, and purple gives her haste. Doedre deals pure physical damage, and in the Gauntlet she'll deal that extra chaos damage too. You're mainly looking out for her teleport slam. Watch the animation as she begins to rise up into the air and move away from your current location where she's going to land. I'd recommend skipping Ugol and coming back a bit later on, due to the high gardens which you have to move through to get to that zone, which is full of porcupines. If you have a lot of attack avoidance like evasion or block, or good fizz and chaos mitigation, you could consider running this now. The Ugol boss itself isn't too bad, but this zone can be a bit problematic. Take the Lunaris Temple slow. It's easy to get body blocked and overwhelmed in the halls due to the awkward layout. You can use the Harbour Bridge to farm experience and gear, go from one end to the other and reset the zone each time by holding control and clicking the zone entrance. I'd recommend leveling to at least 65 here before progressing to fight Solaris and Lunaris. In this fight, the most dangerous ability is used by Solaris. That's this one right here. She'll line up her spear and fire it with a bunch of sunbeams crisscrossing the arena. This animation will go off much faster in the Gauntlet. When you see her doing this, you want to stand directly behind her where you can't get hit by it. Be careful with the Lunaris projectiles too, just try to rotate around her while fighting so you don't get hit by all of them at the same time. Now if you've made it to Act 9, you can farm the Blood Aqueducts until level 70 or even beyond that if you want to. Act 9 is widely considered as the most dangerous act in the Gauntlet campaign, largely due to the end boss sequence. The rest of the act is okay for the most part. Watch out for these sand scorpions on the way to Shikari. Their projectiles deal a lot of damage. Avoid Shikari's slam and the tail sweep. The slam will be especially huge in the Gauntlet, so keep your distance. In the refinery, pay attention to General Addis's animations. His earthquake slam can be hard to see normally, and in the Gauntlet the initial animation will be much faster. Just kite him away so that you don't get hit by the aftershock, and stay away from his explosion when he starts to charge up. Before fighting the Depraved Trinity, you'll need to kill the 3 sub-bosses. In previous Gauntlets with the multi-proj modifier, Shavron was incredibly rippy, but in the Runic Strife Gauntlet there's no multi-proj at this stage of the campaign, and Shavron deals pure lightning damage with the exception of the Ghost Brutus Slam, which deals fizz with half converted to lightning, so be sure to watch out for that slam. For Malagaro, like the earlier encounter in the campaign, you're watching out for his teleport slam, and once again, when he does this, move behind him to avoid getting hit. Be careful for the Curse Aura totems on the way to Doedre. The Temporal Chains one in particular slows you down and makes it a lot easier for enemies to hit you. In Doedre's arena, she'll summon 3 totems. Each one applies debuffs similar to Temporal Chains, Vulnerability, and Enfeeble. The purple debuff lessens your action speed, the green debuff lessens your damage, and the red debuff makes you take increased damage. These stack up over time, and killing the corresponding colour totem will remove all of the debuffs of that type. When Doedre uses her Scream ability, you can hide behind a totem to block the damage. Ideally, you kill the red and purple totem to remove their debuffs and hide behind the green totem to avoid the Scream before killing it and then going on to kill Doedre. The Depraved Trinity deals a lot of damage and has some giant AoE abilities. The slam must be avoided at all costs, and you want to find a clean part of the arena to stand in while the book explosions go off. The scorpions spawned between phases deal a lot of damage. Be sure to activate your guard skill and a granite or jade flask as they enter the arena before hitting you. Watch out for the big red orbs as well. Into Act 10, look out for Kitava's heralds on the rooftop once again. Their leap slam and projectiles are especially dangerous. The desecrated chambers can be used to farm experience and gear if needed, but I generally advise farming the blood aqueducts instead if you still need to farm experience at this stage, as some of the monsters in this zone can be quite dangerous, especially the window shards which deal a lot of physical damage. For Avarius, you're looking to avoid his big sweeping attack which deals a very large amount of physical damage. This boss just deals pure physical damage, and his hits are going to hurt quite a bit with the Fizz as extra chaos in play. Avoid the moving red beams too, they put a physical degen debuff on you. Valenta has been historically rippy in past gauntlets with extra projectile modifiers, but she'll be a bit less so in this one. Just a bit. You still need to be careful here because this boss deals physical damage with some conversion to fire. Watch out for the slam in her enraged form and avoid the projectiles that she fires in a line which then return back to her. These bone husks in the ossuary can be quite dangerous, especially when there are several of them all at once. Their spikes deal a lot of physical damage. Now, something to be aware of as you approach the end of the campaign is that the third lab, that's the Merciless Labyrinth, is area level 68. This means that it has white map modifiers rather than campaign modifiers, making it significantly easier to enter and farm. Be aware that we do not know what Exile does just yet, if he has any extra abilities or is going to be joined by other bosses, so Exile himself may still be very dangerous. Before progressing to Kitava, take note of your resistances and keep in mind that you'll be losing another 30% after Kitava is slain. Continue to farm gear and currency in the blood aqueducts if needed for upgrades before moving forward. Act 10 Kitava is significantly more rippy than Act 5, largely due to the modifiers which substantially impact his slower, larger abilities. Kitava's most dangerous abilities are the two slams, the first which begins as 4 red circles and moves towards you before converging into one and exploding, and the other where Kitava creates runes on the ground which explode shortly after. With the haste modifier, both of these will activate much faster and they'll be harder to avoid because of the larger AoE. Try to pay attention to Kitava's animations to know when he's using those abilities so you can move as fast as possible. Once Kitava has been defeated, you've beaten the Gauntlet campaign. Early maps will feel like a breeze compared to the zones in Act 10 because the modifiers now get substantially easier, at least for a while. Don't forget to return to any bosses you skipped in the campaign to complete and collect any missing passive points. Now for mapping, the best way to look at this is that the zone modifiers already exist on your map. Imagine the map you're placing in the device is a rare map with all of those modifiers already on it, and ask yourself if you would run that map with all of the modifiers combined. If the answer is no, it's probably the correct decision to roll over that map. Generally, you want to avoid monster damage modifiers which are multipliers with each other. For example, the Gauntlet map mods will have generic increased monster damage, which increases at yellow tier and again at red tier. If you roll Monster, Fizz as extra elemental or chaos on your maps, the monsters in that map are going to be dealing significantly more damage because they're not only gaining extra damage, but their base damage and the extra damage is also being boosted by the Gauntlet modifier for generic damage, and this can be exceptionally bad if you get unlucky with the inhabitants of that map. There's also the haste modifier to consider, which is naturally a multiplier to monster damage. You generally want to be quite conservative with your maps. If your only goal is to reach level 90 in the Gauntlet to enter the raffle, you can do that by only farming white maps if you want to. It will take longer, but it's a lot safer to do so. You may consider running any yellow maps that you drop, but you don't have to roll them rare because you're not interested in Atlas completion in that case. And that's pretty much it. This video has been slimmed down a bit because I didn't have enough time to put everything I wanted into it, but hopefully I picked out the most significant dangers in the campaign to help you make it out alive. If you're playing the Gauntlet tomorrow, I wish you good luck, Exile. You may need it. Thanks for watching this video, and thank you for your ongoing support. as always, stay tuned and stay safe.